Good morning, everyone. We are the Group 6 and I, Mayola Shandiemae T, together with my group members, Catubig Joemarie, Partosa Neil Albert B, and Suelto Queneden C, will be reporting about sustaining biodiversity, saving species, and ecosystem services. In this lesson, we will be discussing the different key concepts, which are, first, what role do humans play in the loss of species and ecosystem services? Second, why should we try to sustain wild species and the ecosystem services they provide? Third, how do humans accelerate species extinction and degradation of ecosystem services? And lastly, how can we sustain the wild species and the ecosystem services they provide? What is biodiversity and why is it important? Biodiversity is a term that is given to describe the variety of life on Earth and the natural patterns it forms. Biodiversity provides functioning ecosystems that supply oxygen, clean air and water, pollination of plants, pest control, wastewater treatment, and many other ecosystem services. This involves diversity of genes within a species of species within ecosystem and of ecosystem and the biosphere. Although many humans may not realize how important biodiversity is to them, it is clear that without it, humans would not be able to exist. Biodiversity is built with three intertwined features, and these are genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Genetic diversity is all the different genes contained in all individual plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms. Species diversity is the variety of species within a habitat or a region. Some habitats, such as rainforests and coral reefs, have many species. Others, such as salt flats or a polluted stream, have fewer. Ecosystem diversity is the variety of ecosystem in a given place. An ecosystem is a community of organisms and their physical environment interacting together. An ecosystem can cover a large area such as whole forest or a small area such as pond. Why is biodiversity important, especially to us humans, in the form of ecosystem services? What are ecosystem services? These are the benefits sustainable ecosystem provide that are experienced by living organisms, including humans. We get a lot of things directly from biodiversity like food, housing, clothing, transportation, medicines, and even energy, and also the indirect services delivered to us by healthy ecosystems. So let us now proceed to the first key concept, which is what role do humans play in the loss of species and ecosystem services? Many individuals do not think about the damage they are causing in biodiversity. However, it is important as humans to realize the impact we have on biodiversity, because without it, there would be no human existence. If no changes are made in the ways humans use resources on Earth, there will be a continued degradation of biodiversity until human lives can no longer be sustained. It is important for humans to realize how the actions affect biodiversity and the importance of what biodiversity has left on Earth through proper education. And by demanding that government make decisions to preserve biodiversity, the human population will be able to sustain life on Earth longer. Human-environment interaction. Human activity. Humans adapt and modify the environment to sustain their needs and goals, clearing land for agriculture, creating dams for storing, and diverting water, and more. The environment. The environment can affect us in many ways. Pollution sways our decision to stay in certain places. Climate change may affect disease patterns and prompt us to take heightened precautionary health measures, to name a few. There is no clear way of determining the total impact that humans are making on biodiversity. However, it is obvious that many actions by humans are causing a decrease in biodiversity. There are direct and indirect actions by humans that have resulted in the decrease of biodiversity. First is indirect human drives. Collectively, these factors influence the level of production and consumption of ecosystem services and sustainability of production. These factors are demographic, economic, socio-political, and cultural and religious. A direct driver unequivocally influences ecosystem processes. Most of the direct drivers of change in ecosystem and biodiversity services currently remain constant or are growing in intensity in most ecosystems. The following factors of direct human drives are: first, the removal of species, air and water pollution, harvesting, and climate change. Species are becoming extinct at least 1,000 times faster than the historical rate. By the end of the century, extinction rate is expected to be 10,000 times higher. The current extinction is most likely the result of human activity, especially over the past century. Scientists estimate that 100 to 10,000 species, from microscopic organisms to large plants and animals, go extinct each year. This is 100 to 1,000 times faster than historic extinction rates. Species can become extinct when humans overhunt and overfish, pollute the environment, destroy habitats, and introduce new species to areas. Extinction are natural, but sometimes they increase sharply. Through the examination of fossil records, we can see a sharp increase in the ratio at which extinction happened. We have here biological extinction. Biological extinction occurs when a species can no longer be found anywhere on Earth. No species member alive, meaning to say this is the dying out or the extermination of a species. Second is trophic cascade. Trophic cascade happens when population declines or extinction among connected species. Mass extinction. Extinction of many species in a short period of time. Past causes most likely involved global changes in environmental condition, and mass extinction can be an opportunity for species to fill empty ecological niches. Some human activities hasten extinction and threaten ecosystem services. Extinction is a natural process, and there is a natural rate at which organisms cycle out of the current profile of organ, and this is called background extinction. And this is when approximately one species is going to be extinct per year for every 1 million species that are present on Earth. Extinction rate have risen recently. Current extinction rate is at least 100 times higher than typical background rate of 0.0001%. Rate of extinction and threats to ecosystem services likely to rise sharply in the next 50 to 100 years due to harmful human impacts. Large scales of lost species would greatly impact ecosystem services that humans rely on. Endangered and threatened species are ecological smoke alarms. We have here the endangered and the threatened species. Endangered species. These are so few individuals that the species could soon become extinct. Next is threatened species, or what we call the vulnerable species. There are still enough individuals to survive, but numbers are declining and may soon be endangered. Many species have characteristics that make them vulnerable to extinction. These are examples of organisms that are critically endangered species. They are currently threatened by the extinction largely because of human activity. Mexican gray wolf, about 42 in the forest of Arizona and New Mexico. Sumatran tiger, not more than 500 on the Indonesian island of Sumatra. The whooping crane, 437 in North America. California condor, 222 in the southwestern United States. The Philippine eagle. It is considered to be one of the largest and most powerful among forest raptors. They are also listed as critically endangered by the National Union for Conservation of Nature, with an estimated number of only 400 pairs left in the wild. The tamarau is at extremely high risk of extinction, with the total population likely numbering not more than 580 individuals. The tamarau is the only wild cattle species found in the Philippine archipelago and is the largest land mammal of the country. The loss of Philippine tarsier habitat is primarily due to logging and mining in the forest that they live in, along with the persistence of an illegal pet trade industry and being hunted for food by local people have threatened the tarsier population. The Philippine crocodile is one of the most endangered crocodilian species, with estimates of wild population fewer than 100. Their major threats include hunting and habitat destruction. The Negros bleeding heart dove requires urgent conservation intervention to prevent its extinction in the wild. This poorly studied species has been considered critically endangered due to its fragmented and declining population. The Walden's hornbill, locally called dulungan, also known as the Visayan wrinkled hornbill, is a critically endangered species of hornbill living in the rainforests on the islands of Negros and Panay in the Philippines. Some of the characteristics that would put certain species in greater danger becoming to have to with their low productive rate or case strategist. Being particularly low, an organism that is case strategist is just simply not going to produce the same number of species, so their reproductive is very low. And examples of this are the blue whale, giant panda, and rhinoceros. Specialized niche. An organism can only be found within very limited or specific condition. It is considered to have a specialized niche. Examples of these are the blue whale, giant panda, and Everglade kite. Narrow distribution. Examples of these are elephant seal, desert, and pupfish. Feeds at a high trophic level. This means that they are going to be a subject to bioaccumulation. These are also less individuals, and examples of these are the Bengal tiger, bald eagle, and grizzly bear. Fixed migratory patterns. It is a pattern of behavior in which animals travel from one habitat to another to search for food, better condition, or reproductive needs. And examples of this are the blue whale, whooping crane, and sea turtle. Rare. Examples of these are African violet and some orchids. Commercially valuable. Examples are snow leopard, tiger, elephant, rhinoceros, and rare plants and birds. And lastly, require large territories. These are California condor, grizzly bear, and Florida panther.
Now, let us move on to our new topic, which is why should we try to sustain wild species and the ecosystem services they provide. Forest ecosystems provide services far greater in value than the value of raw materials obtained from the forest. Forest ecosystems are important for the survival of living beings, including us humans. They are vital for our life as they provide oxygen, food, shelter, fuel, and means of livelihood for the tribal people living in around the forest area. Okay, so this illustration shows us how long does it takes for an average tree to grow unto its maturity age and then only ends up being cut down by arborists and loggers in just a few minutes. Shown in this picture is what a damaged or destroyed forest ecosystem looks like. I believe it is caused by kaingin, where they slash and burn trees, where it causes soil erosion, loss of soil fertility, thus destroying our forest ecosystem. Okay, so an example of forest ecosystem that needs to be protected is rangelands. Rangelands are used to raise livestock for food and fiber, harvest renewable and non-renewable energy and mineral resources too. Not only that, but it also provides habitat for wildlife and open space for human enjoyment and recreation. Now, let us talk about why we should avoid hastening the extinction of wild species. We should avoid hastening the extinction of wild species because as part of the world's ecosystems, wildlife provides balance and stability to nature's processes. Healthy ecosystems depend on plants and animals as their foundations. When a certain species becomes extinct, it is a sign that the ecosystem is slowly falling apart. Each species that is lost triggers the loss of other species within its ecosystem as well. And we should take note that it could take millions of years for nature to recover from large-scale extinctions. Okay, so some of us might think that a certain species has no use for us human beings and has no right to exist in the first place. But we should also understand that each species has a specific function within an ecosystem and will greatly affect us human beings directly or indirectly. Okay, so here are some examples of species that we should protect. So the first is orangutans. So for the record, there are approximately 61,000 orangutans that remains in the wild today. Orangutans help forest health by acting as the world's largest seed dispersers. They cover large areas as they forage for food. An additional risk is fragmented habitat. They spend most of their time in trees, and that's where they thrive. Next is Calimian and Philippine spotted deer. Calimian and Philippine spotted deer are probably the most endangered deer in the world. This is partly due to habitat destruction, but illegal hunting is also a problem for this species. It is estimated that only 500 may remain in the wild today. Next is bonbon sardine, or also known as tawilis. Tawilis, the world's only freshwater sardine that is endemic to Taal Lake, was declared endangered in 2019. With its population dwindling due to overfishing, livelihoods and food security are threatened, and the lake ecosystem further damaged. Waling-waling, also known as Queen of Philippine Orchids. The waling-waling is flower endemic only to the island of Mindanao, where the indigenous Bagobo tribes worship it as a deity, and it is also considered as the Philippine national flower alongside the sampaguita. But it is now threatened due to the destruction of its wild habitat. Next on the list is Arabica coffee. It is the most popular kind of coffee for commercial production. Arabica is already on the endangered species list. Previously, researchers revealed that Arabica coffee could become extinct in as little as 60 years from now. Scientists have also been reporting that for years, wild Arabica subpopulations are on decline due to deforestation, climate change, genetic erosion, pests, and diseases. That's why By conserving wildlife, we're ensuring that future generations can enjoy our natural world and the incredible species that live within it. To help protect wildlife, it is also important to understand how species interact within their ecosystem and how they're affected by environmental and human influences.
Good day everyone, I am Queneden Suelto and I am assigned to report how do humans accelerate species extinction and degradation of ecosystem services. Extinction of species. The most obvious indicator of biodiversity is the number of species on planet. Currently, there are 1.75 million species that have been identified. However, some speculate that there are at least 10 million living species on Earth. Species or extinction occurs when species are diminished because of environmental forces like habitat fragmentations, global change, natural disasters, overexploitation of species for human use, or because of evolutionary changes in their members like genetic inbreeding, poor reproductions, decline in population numbers. Species extinctions happens when environmental factors or evolutionary problems cause a species to die out. Next is, there are greatest threats to species which the biodiversity researchers had summarized, which it is called a direct causes of extinction with its acronym HIPCO or HIPPCO. First is habitat loss, or H for habitat loss, degradation, or fragmentation. I for invasive non-native species. P for population and resource use growth. Another P for pollution. C for climate change. O for overexploitation. When we say habitat loss, it occurs as a result of natural events such as floods, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and climate fluctuations. This also refers to the disappearance of natural environments that are home to particular plants and animals. Habitat fragmentation. When we say habitat fragmentation, it occurs when large intact habitat is divided into smaller isolated patches, and the division is caused by roads, logging, crops, and urban developments. There is also barriers that limit species ability to disperse and colonize areas, locate food and mates. So this reduces animal ranges and restricts movements, placing animals in these areas at higher risk of extinction. Next is the invasive species. It is any non-native species that significantly modifies or disrupts the ecosystems it colonizes. So it is a non-native species, may have no natural predators, competitors, parasites, or pathogens. A non-native species can crowd out native species, and it is viewed as harmful invasive species. So it is likely to cause economic or environmental harm, or to harm human, animals, or plants. So they are able to adapt or to become established, reproduce, and spread. They also colonize the environment, create new populations, and it also impact on biodiversity's health and economy, because they act as predators, hindering the growth of native species, altering habitats, causing physical and chemical changes to soil. They also compete for food and space by hybriding with the native species and introducing new parasites and diseases. Example of invasive species is zebra mussel. So this species or zebra mussel spreads very quickly, causing damage to habitats and to industrial, agricultural, and urban water supply systems by blocking filters and pipes. So it negatively impact ecosystems in many ways because mussel or zebra mussel filter out algae that native species need for food and they attach to it, and some accidentally introduced species can disrupt ecosystem like Burmese python, or they accidentally introduced Burmese python, African python, and boa constrictor in Florida. So these pets is imported from or are imported from Africa and Asia and released into Everglades wetlands. So in South Florida, snakes represents as a threat to the native wildlife. Predation by these animals is altering food webs and ecosystem services, and that's why they consider as an invasive species due to their impact to the native wildlife. Next is human population growth and rising resource use per person, degrading wildlife habitat. It is another consequence of human development, which as number of people increases or as human populations grow, they consider as a base of the biodiversity's loss. Because as human population continues to grow and grow, there is an increase of resources that use per person, of which persons uses more land for agriculture and for the new development like cities and towns that will spread out over in a widening area. Humans indirectly cause habitat degradation through climate change, invasive species, and pollution. Speaking of pollution is when contaminants are released into the environment and they cause environmental degradation and alter the natural ecosystem, thus causing loss of biodiversity. Under pollution, there are two types: the bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Bioaccumulation occurs in individual organisms, and biomagnification occurs when a chemical becomes more concentrated as it moves up through food chains and food web. The difference between the two is that bioaccumulation occurs or is the increase of a toxic substance in an organism, while the biomagnification is the increase of toxic substance when going along a food chain from a lower level to a higher level. Next is climate change. Speaking of climate change, human activities are triggering the sixth mass extinction our Earth has seen, changing the circulation, abundance, and functions of many species. This will accelerate the sixth extinction, and sixth extinction is caused by human activity like the unsustainable use of land, water, energy, and climate change. Major loss of diversity and ecosystem services, and some species will become extinct and some will spread. Example of species that will become extinct due to climate change is monarch butterfly. or it is called as Daunus flexipus. A monarch butterfly is famous for their impressive migration across North America. Like other butterfly, monarch butterfly is very sensitive to weather and climate. The increased frequency of extreme weather events threatening the future of this charismatic species. Like monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed. As climate change continues to warm, the butterfly's range is became drier, or it will become dry ang iyahang range, resulting in the loss of food or the loss of vital food plants. The last one is the overexploitation. Overexploitation is the process of harvesting too many aquatic or terrestrial animals, which depletes the stocks of some species while driving others to extinction. Terrestrial animals may be overexploited as sources of food, garments, jewelries, medicines, or pets. So, one of the example of overexploitation is poaching and smuggling of protected animals. Like, it is an organized crime involved because of huge profit involved. The poaching of elephants for their valuable ivory and rhinos for these horns, which are used in traditional medicine, is a major threat to these species. Like, yes, elephants and rhinos are killed for this tusk, for their tusks and horns. Tigers poach for their skin and other body parts. Also, pet trade. Pet trade is treats animals as mere money-making commodities to mass produced and peddled for profit. Animals are routinely denied socialization, exercise, and even base veterinary care. So, kaning pet trade is an example for this, kay kanang bantay mo ng mga animals nga gisulod sa cage. So, muna sila mga exotic birds and amphibians, reptiles, tropical fish, katong gidabaligya gani nga gisulod sila sa cage. And so, that's all for my report.
Good morning once again, everyone. I am Neil Albert B. Partosa, and I will be discussing on how can we sustain wild species and the ecosystem services they provide. Before I proceed to my discussion, let me give you first a short introduction. All of us know that different species are a vital part of the Earth's natural capital, and this is why we need to be mindful of our human actions for us to be able to sustain and protect other species, as well as the different ecosystem services that they provide. There are corresponding reasons why we should work for us to be able to prevent the extinction of other wild species caused by the human activities that we are engaging in. So the first reason is that the wild species provide natural resources and natural services that help to keep us human beings alive and support human economies. Second, various plant species provide food for crops, fuel, wood and lumber, paper and medicine, and lastly, preserving species also provides economic benefits through wildlife tourism or ecotourism. So now let us proceed to the next slide. So how we can reduce species extinction and how we can sustain the ecosystem services they provide. So first is establishing and enforcing national environmental laws and international treaties. Through establishing such laws and international treaties, we can be able to protect animals, resources, and habitats because the purpose of the environmental law is to protect the environment and create rules for how people can use natural resources. Environmental laws not only aim to protect the environment from harm, but they also determine who can use natural resources and on what terms. Second, creating protected wildlife sanctuaries. Creating protected wildlife sanctuaries are a critical tool for safeguarding biodiversity maintaining ecosystem balance, preserving important habitats, building resilience to climate change, providing global food security, maintaining water quality, conserving natural resources, driving economic success, curbing the spread of diseases and pests, and providing many other benefits to wildlife and human health. And third, taking precautionary measures to prevent such harm. Taking different precautionary measures is a vital thing to do in order for the extinction of different species and ecosystem services will be prevented. Some of these precautionary measures are buy eco-friendly products, follow the 3R rule, don't buy souvenirs made from endangered species, eat less meat, and lastly, spread awareness, get involved. So, through these 5 precautionary measures, we can be able to sustain the wildlife and prevent them from disappearing. So, we can establish wildlife refuges and other protected areas. In 1903, Theodore Roosevelt established the first federal wildlife refuge. With the establishment of the first National Wildlife Refuge on Pelican Island on March 14, 1903, Roosevelt created the National Wildlife Refuge System. While in office, he would go on to create 50 more federal bird reserves and 4 national game preserves within the refuge system. So why was Pelican Island created? It was created to protect egrets and other birds from extinction through plum hunting. By the way, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., often referred to as Teddy or by his initials TR, was an American politician, statesman, soldier, conservationist, naturalist, historian, and writer who served as the 26th President of the United States from 1901 to 1909. Wildlife refuges. Number 1. Most are wetland sanctuaries. Number 2. Harmful activities such as mining, drilling, and using off-road vehicles legal in most refuges. So let's proceed to the next slide. Seed banks, botanical gardens, and wildlife farms can help protect species. Seed banks preserve genetic material of endangered plants. A seed bank stores seeds to preserve genetic diversity. Hence, it is a type of gene bank. There are many reasons to store seeds. One is to preserve the genes that plant breeders need to increase yield, disease resistance, drought tolerance, nutritional quality, taste, etc. of crops. So what is the purpose of a seed bank? A seed bank is a place where seeds are stored to preserve genetic diversity for the future. They are usually flood, bomb, and radiation-proof vaults holding jars of seeds from different plant species. So what are some disadvantages of seed banks? Seed banks have one major drawback. They are not a viable option for all plants in the world. In fact, a study published in 2018 in the journal Nature Plants revealed that 36% of endangered plant species cannot be stored in seed banks. So what is the biggest seed bank in the world? It is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Botanical gardens are arboreta, living plants. A botanical garden is a garden with greenhouses for the culture, study, and exhibition of special plants. It can have all kinds of plants, bushes, shrubs, bedding plants, flowers, vegetables, herbs, trees. An arboretum is a specialized botanical garden that features trees and other woody plants but may also include other kinds of plants. An arboretum is a botanical garden containing living collections of woody plants intended and least partly for scientific study, but also to inspire curiosity and build knowledge about plants and wooded landscapes in order to enhance life, preserve nature, and advance sound stewardship practices. Farms can raise organisms for commercial sale. Zoos and aquariums. Why is it important to preserve endangered species? Healthy ecosystems depend on plant and animal species as their foundations. When a species becomes endangered, it is a sign that the ecosystem is slowly falling apart. Each species that is lost triggers the loss of other species within its ecosystem. Humans depend on healthy ecosystem to purify our environment. So here are some techniques for preserving endangered terrestrial species. Number 1, egg polling. Number 2, captive breeding. Number 3, artificial insemination. Number 4, embryo transfer. Number 5, use of incubators. Last, cross-fostering. Moving on, we can be able to rehabilitate and partially restore ecosystems that we have damaged through ecological restoration, carrying out rehabilitation, and the 4R rule, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, and rethink. Ecosystems are regularly restored by natural phenomena such as floods from cyclones, hurricanes, or wildfires started by lightning. Nevertheless, natural disturbances typically lead to succession and a return to ecological conditions that can sustain high levels of biodiversity. However, ecosystems that humans have damaged or destroyed through activities such as unsustainable agriculture and deforestation, overgrazing, or pollution tend to lose their ability to rebound without human intervention. We can be able to rehabilitate the once healthy ecosystem through, first, is the ecological restoration. Ecological restoration is often the best method for providing for the long-term use of degraded sites, whether considered from the perspectives of ecology, social benefit, or even economic benefit. Ecological restoration aims to restore damaged ecosystems to a point where their ecosystem functions and species composition resemble their original or near original state. Repairing damages and succession practices such as restoration, rehabilitation, replacement, and creating artificial ecosystem are some ways for us to restore the once healthy ecosystem that we had. Second is carrying out rehabilitation. Identifying what caused the degradation, stopping the abuse, reintroducing new species, and protecting the ecosystem from further degradation can be an effective way or process to be able to reinstate the healthy ecosystem that we had before. The need for rehabilitation is not be justified by cost-benefit or scientific and technological proof, but rests on a value judgment to sustain natural capital for present and future generations. Decision on what activities and projects to permit should be based on what is physically and financially fixable on current knowledge. Business and government must be proactive, develop rehabilitation standards, work out how to meet the standards, design simple powerful metrics to measure performance against the standards, and embark on continuous improvement. Thinking about the 4Rs, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, and rethink, is an easy way to remember how you can protect biodiversity. Start by rethinking. How much waste do you produce? What resources and biodiversity went into the products and packaging that you throw out? Where does the waste go? What species and ecosystem do the waste affect? What can you do to minimize your impact? The next step is to reduce your consumption and waste. You could buy only the amount you actually need and buy products with little packaging. You might eat more fresh foods and compost the waste into your garden. After rethinking and reducing, it is time to start reusing products. Reusing is a great way to decrease waste. You can save money. Think twice before throwing something into the garbage. Can it be repaired? Can someone else use it? Can you invent a new creative use for it? Remember, whenever you reuse something, you are saving resources and biodiversity. If after rethinking, reducing, and reusing, you still are left with waste, then try recycling. Recycling transforms waste into products and companies can use to make new products. It can help preserve biodiversity by limiting the amount of resources needed to make new products, but it's not perfect. Lots of energy is used in collecting, transporting, and processing recycled material. So let's proceed to the next slide. Marine biodiversity is the essential foundation for the structure and functioning of ocean ecosystem and for providing the full range of ecosystem services that benefits humans on local, regional, and global scales. These benefits includes many visible as well as unseen functions and services such as the oxygen we breathe, the seafood we eat, the support of local livelihoods, the marine plants storing blue carbon and protecting our shorelines, the medical and biochemical compounds found in marine species, the coral reefs we explore in scuba diving, and the charismatic creatures inspiring our lives. We can still protect and sustain marine biodiversity through first, mind your carbon footprint and reduce energy consumption. Second, make safe and sustainable seafood choices. Third, don't purchase items that exploit marine life. Fourth, be an ocean-friendly pet owner. Fifth, support organizations working to protect the ocean. And lastly, influence change in your community. Precautionary principle. Act to prevent or reduce harm when preliminary evidence indicates acting is needed. Good strategy in other areas, preventing exposure to harmful chemicals in our air, water, and food. Emphasis on preventing species extinction. Act early rather than when species is nearly extinct. To sum up all what had been stated a while ago, biodiversity is an issue that affects everyone and therefore everyone should be aware of their effect on biodiversity. As biodiversity decreases on Earth, so do the chances of human survival. Therefore, it is important to educate people on living in equilibrium with the environment. It is also important to make sure that the government is making laws that will ensure biodiversity for the future and not focus on short-sighted economics. Hopefully, humans will realize this before it is too late. So, that will be all for our report. Hope you all have learned something from our discussion. To test if you're really listening to the report, let us proceed to our Q&A. Thank you.